In the quiet town of Ravenswood, an old mansion sat on a lonely hill. People in the town said it was haunted. They whispered about strange things happening there, about shadows that moved on their own and voices that echoed in the night. But for a group of 5 friends, Ella, Max, Liam, Sophie, and Jack, the mansion seemed like the perfect place for a night of fun. One chilly autumn evening, they decided to have a party in the mansion. They were excited to explore the creepy house and maybe scare each other a little. As the sun set, they made their way to the mansion, laughing and joking to hide their nervousness. The big wooden door creaked loudly as they pushed it open, and a cold, musty smell greeted them. The mansion was dark and cold, with tall ceilings and dusty furniture covered in white sheets. The friends set up their party in the large, empty ballroom. They hung up lights, played music, and tried to ignore the eerie feeling that hung in the air. The sound of their laughter echoed through the empty halls, but as the night wore on, things began to change. It started with a cold breeze that seemed to come from nowhere, making the candles flicker and the lights dim. The music suddenly stopped, leaving them in an unsettling silence. Then they heard it, a faint whispering sound like someone was talking just out of earshot. "Did you hear that?" Ella asked, her voice shaking a little. "Probably just the wind," Max replied, though he didn't sound convinced. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, like many voices speaking all at once. The friends looked around, trying to find where the sound was coming from, but there was no one there. Just the dark, empty rooms surrounding them. Suddenly, they heard a loud thud, like something heavy falling. The sound came from the hallway outside the ballroom. The friends exchanged nervous glances. Sophie, trying to be brave, grabbed a flashlight. "Let's check it out," she said, her voice trembling. They stepped into the hallway, the flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The air was cold and heavy, and the whispers followed them, growing louder with each step. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the doors lining it all closed tightly. Then, they noticed one door at the end of the hall slowly creaking open. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, barely visible in the dim light. The figure was tall, with a face hidden in darkness. It didn't move, just stood there, watching them. The friends felt a chill run down their spines. "Who are you?" Jack called out, but the figure didn't answer. Instead, it took a step forward, then another. Its movements were slow and deliberate, like it was in no hurry. As it came closer, they could see that its clothes were old and torn, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The whispers turned into a low, rumbling noise, filling the hallway with an eerie sound. "Let's get out of here," Liam shouted, panic setting in. They turned and ran back to the ballroom, but the hallway seemed to twist and turn, leading them in circles. The figure was behind them, its presence growing stronger with every step. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on them, the air thick with fear. Finally, they burst into the ballroom, slamming the door shut behind them. They huddled together, their hearts pounding. The whispers had stopped, but the silence was even more terrifying. They could hear their own breathing, the tension thick in the air. Then, the door to the ballroom creaked open slowly. The figure stood in the doorway, its glowing eyes fixed on them. It stepped into the room, and the friends backed away in fear. The figure raised a hand, pointing at them. The air grew colder, and a deep sense of dread filled the room. The figure lowered its hood, revealing a face that was pale and twisted, like it had been warped by time. The friends recognized the face from one of the portraits in the hallway. It was the last owner of the mansion, a man who had disappeared without a trace years ago. "You should not have come here," the figure said in a voice that echoed with the whispers they had been hearing all night. "This is my home, and you are not welcome." The lights flickered, and the walls began to close in. The figure moved closer, and the friends felt a crushing weight of fear. The room grew darker, the shadows swallowing the light. The friends tried to scream, but their voices were lost in the darkness. Suddenly, the floor beneath them gave way, and they fell into a deep, endless void. The last thing they saw was the figure's glowing eyes, watching them with a cold, merciless gaze. When they awoke, they were lying on the lawn outside the mansion. The sun was rising, and the mansion stood silent and still, as if nothing had happened. They scrambled to their feet, fear gripping their hearts, and ran back to town without looking back. From that day on, the friends never spoke of what happened in the mansion. The townsfolk continued to whisper about the old house on the hill, but no one dared to go near it again. The mansion remained dark and silent, filled with whispers and shadows, waiting for the next unlucky soul who dared to disturb its deadly peace.